I recognize the gentlewoman from Minnesota for 5 minutes.
Thank you for joining us again, Director. I know you didn't come prepared to give parental advice, but that was interesting to watch. This outlook looks better than expected, even compared to the pre-pandemic outlooks. Job growth is strong, unemployment is low, the economy continues to grow. It is clear that policies and investments centered on working families help support a resilient and dynamic economy. Supply-side reforms like housing development and expanded childcare can help strengthen our labor force, increase economic productivity, and grow our fiscal capacity. For example, the CPO outlook projects that net immigration flow will add $7 trillion to the economy over the next decade. Director Swagel, can you explain how comprehensive immigration reform could keep improving our labor force and strengthen economic development?
Yes. It's, as you said, immigration would add to our economy. Our labor force would be higher. That means our income would be higher, our output would be higher, and that in turn would generate additional tax revenue. And that's what we have under the immigration we project so far. A reform could further those changes.
That's wonderful. Childcare is another good example of a policy that invests in our future and can have long-term positive impact for households and the greater economy. Our Education and Labor Committee passed important childcare provisions as part of the Build Back Better plan, lowering the costs for families and increasing the supply of stable, high-quality childcare should help improve labor force participation, especially for mothers, while still guaranteeing livable wages for childcare workers. Does your 2020 analysis of the Democratic proposed policies on childcare support these findings?
Yes, at the time of the Build Back Better legislation, we looked at those proposals, and supporting childcare would increase the labor force participation of parents, especially mothers, which would mean more people in the workforce. And for those individuals, the ones who come back to work, would mean higher earnings for them in the future as well.
Yeah, can you expand a little bit more in detail on the impact on long-term employment and earnings when high-quality childcare is affordable and widely accessible?
I can, and in some sense that's connecting the policy today to improved earnings trajectories. As someone who comes back into the workforce, gains experience, as they gain experience, gain skills, their earnings rise and their incomes rise into the future.
That's wonderful. In last year's outlook, the CPO projected revenues to amount around 18% of GDP in 2023. But in this outlook, you're projecting revenues will amount to 17.5% of GDP in 2024, even though this time around it seems like there are even stronger economic conditions and assumptions. Could you explain this gap, and specifically what variables are you seeing that would lead to this slightly lower revenue levels?
Okay, and in a sense, it's both the numerator and denominator are changing. So it's both the revenue is changing and the GDP, the denominator, is changing. So we see a larger economy, which means that a given number of dollars of revenue will be a smaller fraction. And that, so even though we do have more revenues coming in with the strong economy, as a share of the economy, the numbers, our projection is smaller this year.
Interesting. Finally, can you account for, obviously we have this massive job creation, low unemployment, inflation is down, but it seems, and you probably heard from some of my colleagues, that people are still saying our economy is bad. What do you account for that?
Now, it's a good question. I was going to say, I'm the economist and not the sociologist or psychologist. We've had several challenging years. The economy is coming out of it, but of course, many families' incomes are still affected by the difficult times of the past and the high inflation that we had. even though inflation's come down, the price level is still high. And so all these factors are affecting families.
Well, thank you. I yield back.